Thank you for joining me today on the Who God Says podcast. I am your host and Kingdom Ambassador, Ty Chandra. Hi. Today we have a special guest joining us. Yay! He is a pastor, police chaplain, a marriage coach, and the author of the book Turn It Up. Yay! We have Pastor Kelly Dupee. Yay! Welcome.
Hello there. It's great to
I'm
be
so
with you,
glad to
Ty.
have you. I'm excited. Okay, so today's episode is going to be titled The Power of Communication. And I know you have a lot of expertise in this background. So I want to dive right in. You have a book called Turn It Up. What led you to write the Turn It Up book, and how did you get the title?
Very good. Well, I remember when my son, years ago, probably close to 10 years ago now, came to me and said, "Hey, we want to get married." Him and his girlfriend, his fiance, they were engaged. And the next morning, I just began to pray and pray for my son, pray for this, upcoming wedding. And I just began to think, what can I give him? And I had the idea, which I think was God's idea, to just write down everything I knew about being married. My wife and I at that time had been married maybe 25 years or so. And so felt like I'd
Wow.
learned quite a bit. And okay, here we go. What can I say? And so I just every morning would get out my computer and just start writing stuff down and started thinking about, came up with a rough outline. So the title "Turn It Up," it dawned on me. In fact, in some of my research for the book, I came across a study that was quoted by a real famous relationship kind of guru that's out there, a guy by the name of John Gottman. And in one of his books, he talks about the fact that they did a study of divorced couples and they asked them what went wrong. And the answer really surprised me because it wasn't things like, infidelity. In fact, what it was a simple drifting apart. And so what I was thinking about is the fact that, okay, if they drift apart, what went wrong? And I was reminded of if you go to the hardware store, and you ask for a light switch, you need to replace a light switch in your house. All right. They're going to ask you, what kind of light switch do you want? There's basically two types. One is a toggle switch. That's the up and down, on and off, flip it and it goes on, whatever. The other, though, is a dimmer switch. And it dawned on me as I was thinking about this that what happens in a lot of marriages when this drift starts happening, that basically things start turning down the connection, the strength of it. The communication goes south. They start arguing more. They're not spending time with each other. They stop going out on dates. They're probably not being physically intimate. All kinds of things. And what do we need to do if life? And then I thought, well, you know what? Life kind of turns things down. Maybe it's our choices, our priorities. Certainly if you focus more on the kids than on your marriage. Let's see, your jobs really can take a couple apart, if they're both working in opposite schedules, that kind of thing. And then sometimes it's even just our hobbies that tend to cause this drift apart. So what do we need to do? If life turns it down, we need to turn it up.
Turn it up.
So it is all about a dimmer switch. Think of your relationship or marriage as a dimmer switch. And if you start drifting apart, what can you intentionally do to turn it back up, to have that strong connection and a great relationship that you really want? So that's where the title came from. And I've had just a lot of great feedback on it. People have really told me how helpful it's been. Had one guy say, well, if I want finances, I'm going to go to read Dave Ramsey's book. And he named off several different authors. And he said, but if I want to learn how to be married, I'm going to go to Pastor Kelly and read his
that's
book, Turn It Up.
awesome.
So
Yes,
anyways, I was very encouraged by that.
that's awesome. I love to hear great feedback like that because you never know who you're impacting when you're just doing the things that God told you to do. You never know who you're impacting, and that is so awesome. I live for that. I just love it.
Thank you.
So you said you were married 25 years when you started writing the book. How long have you been married now?
Well, my wife and I 2 weeks ago celebrated 36 years of marriage. It was actually, now that I think about it, because my son was probably 27 or 28 at the time. So we were, maybe it was closer to 30 years being married, not 25, if I want to get my math right. But anyways, we just celebrated 36 a couple of weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
My God. That is so awesome. I can't wait to say we're at 30 years married. I can't wait for that. Oh my God. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your backstory, like dealing with your relationships, whether in a marriage or dating. Like, what are some of your struggles, or what are some of the things that you had to learn that pertains to communication?
Okay. Well, first off, as believers, I want to encourage anybody that might be single. And I understand you're a single mom, Ty. So you and
Yes.
any others in the audience, trust God and ask God to bring you his best in terms of a
Yes.
spouse, a husband or a wife. When I was single, I was in one relationship after another. I was that kind of guy that felt like he was lonely and needed to be in a relationship. And so one after another, just dating everybody that would agree to go out with me. And of course, those relationships never last because I wasn't ready. God was working in my heart. So a friend of mine challenged me to take a year and to fast from all kinds of dating relationships. And when he first said that, I thought he was crazy. Like, really? I can't do that. But then I saw the wisdom in it, because what God needed to do was get my heart right and get me ready to be the kind of husband that he wanted me to be. And so during that fast, I really began to just seek the Lord. And, I felt one day in prayer, the Lord just asking me, do you want to get married? And I said, yes, Lord, I do. And then he said, well, what kind of wife do you want me to give you? And I said, well, that's easy, Lord. I want you to give me the best. And so by faith, I just began to thank the Lord in advance for his best. And I want to encourage you to do the same. Ask the Lord to bring you to the right person. Now, I don't believe, by the way, there's only one right person, okay? So that, oh my goodness, I married the wrong person. I need to go get rid of this one and go find another one. No, that's not the way it works. But ask God to lead you by his Holy Spirit to the right person. Then you want to invest in your relationship. And I think one of the big mistakes that caused the drifting apart that I was just talking about is wrong priorities. So we prioritize our kids, our hobbies, and certainly our jobs over our relationship. And then, another one, like you said, communication is really crucial and key. But it's not just communication. I think what's missing, because most people know how to talk, right? You know how to talk. I know how to
Right.
talk. So we talk. What's missing is understanding. And the key to understanding is learning how to listen.
Yes.
That's what we need to do. We need to really start working on our ability to listen. So just what got us to this point? My wife and I, actually, interestingly enough, to go back to your question, when I wrote the book and gave my son and his wife a rough draft of it, soon after they were married, then I just it was just sitting in my computer for the longest time. Didn't really know what to do with it. Didn't feel it was ready yet to go public. But then my wife and I really went through a rough patch. And
Mm.
it came because we weren't listening to each other. We weren't trying to understand. We were just caught up in a really difficult situation. And we're going two different directions. You know, you talk about being on the same page. It felt like we were not even reading from the same book. We
Oh,
were
wow.
so opposite on what we felt was best to do regarding this challenge we were facing. And as I look back on it now, in fact, I still remember praying and saying, God, help me to show my wife that this is the right path. Help me, Lord, change her mind, change her heart. Lord, show me how to persuade her. Can
Oh,
you believe?
wow.
Can you hear the arrogance in that, prayer, right? And as I look back on it, one of the things that I realized is that I needed to stop praying, God, change my wife. And
Yeah.
what turned it around for me, in fact, it was a meme that I saw on Facebook. Somebody put, you post these little pictures that sometimes speak to you. I like to do that now as well. But I don't create them, I just steal them from other people and then I repost them. But anyways, one of the things I saw was this thing that said, stop praying for God to change your spouse, start praying for God to change you. And that was like the Holy Spirit said, yes, that's your problem. And so
Yep.
I
Light
did. I
bulb.
said, God, exactly. The light bulb went on, and I just started, Lord, show me how to be the best husband you want me to be. Change me. And he did. And the first thing he wanted me to start doing was focus on listening and understanding. And so I think, when it talks about communication, like I said, getting back to that point, we know how to express ourselves. Sometimes we're afraid to be honest, but what we really don't want to do, we want to do it, but what we find hard to do is to listen. In fact, I was in a coaching conversation I had the other day, was talking to this couple about listening and understanding each other, and the wife spoke up and said, "It's hard to listen when you don't feel you're being listened to." So I went, whoa, okay, well, we got some work to do here. So I'm kind of breaking that down and teaching both of them what are some things that we can do, that you can do to start listening more to each other. And it's little things. You can find this anywhere. This isn't unique to me, but it's things like you got to pay attention. You got to turn off your phone. You got to focus in on what is the other person saying. And then I like to teach this little technique called active listening, which is basically you focus on what the other person's saying, and then when they're done, instead of thinking about how you're going to reply, which is the big trap that we all fall in, right? Instead of listening, what do? We're thinking about, what am I going to say when she stops talking?
Yes.
So exactly. Yeah. See, and so, um, anyways, the technique or the skill that I like to teach couples to do is, instead of focusing on what you're going to say, focus on repeating back what you just heard. So my wife is telling me about something troubling. She's confronting me about some stupid thing that I did that she didn't like, some mistake that I made. Instead of going defensive or explaining or excusing, okay, I'm going to reply with, well, here's what I hear you say, especially if she's hurt, especially if there's some emotion involved, and that's that really, my goal is not to defend myself. My goal is to help my wife feel understood. And so that's empathizing, which is trying to feel what she's feeling. And then it's also validating. And validation is a little bit different than understanding. Validating is that, what you're saying makes sense. I can see why you feel the way you do, or why you think that about this, why your perspective isn't crazy.
Yeah.
Even though I may not agree, but we oftentimes, that's the other thing I think in communication, is that we tend to be judgmental.
Yes.
Somebody sharing their thought or their perspective, and we're all about correcting them, right?
Yes.
So, anyways,
Definitely.
Yeah, these kinds of techniques and skills that I work with couples now, I've seen some great results, and yeah, they're couples are starting. The ones that I'm working with are starting to really focus in on listening and understanding each other and making the other person feel understood. Um, oh, here's another quick tip. So the reason it is that couples don't like to do this understanding thing is that they say, yeah, but when is it going to be my turn? So there needs to be kind of this agreement that when my wife is expressing herself and I'm focusing on helping her feel understood, that then when she does feel understood, it's my turn. And now her job is to help me feel understood. So it is a mutual, you got to kind of agree to go there with each other. You got to
Yeah.
agree to be that kind of supportive communication, thing. But when you do, it pays huge dividends because
Mm.
that's when you can problem solve. And it's a great way to reconnect and start turning it back up again. To refer to my book.
That is awesome. That's awesome. It's crazy because you mentioned not listening just to respond. And I tell my children that all the time. Like I have teenagers, and every time I talk to them, I'm telling them something. It's like as soon as I take a pause, they're ready to say, "Oh no, because I," and I'm like, "No, stop listening just to respond. Take in what I'm saying and understand what I'm saying. Like, don't just try to hurry up and wait for your turn so you can say what you need to say and defend yourself. It's not always about defending yourself. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
just about understanding so you can know the proper way to continue or to move forward."
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's great. Yes, yes. And if you teach, you can teach this skill to your kids, your teenagers. Maybe
yeah.
if you have younger ones, it might be a little bit hard for them to grasp. But that skill of, you know what, let's try this. I'm going to tell you a story, and you can tell them any story, okay,
Mhm.
maybe from your childhood. And instead of just replying with whatever comes in your mind, I want you to repeat it back to me.
Mm.
Okay, so let's play this game, and then you could teach him how to do that. And then when it is something serious, and you are wanting to instruct them or guide them or correct them or whatever it is that you need to do, hey, let's focus on understanding here. Okay, tell me what I just said. What did
Yeah.
you just hear me say?
Yes.
And you get them to do that. That's going to improve definitely. I've had situations where I've used this at work,
Yes.
where instead of judging people, and by work, I work at a church. I'm an associate pastor, and
Mhm.
I'm kind of the pastor that everybody calls, when they're in crisis and needing prayer or a
Yeah.
hospital visit or, different things like this. I do funerals a lot. And so I'm kind of that I do a lot of that kind of ministry.
Mm.
And so what I've found is that, especially if somebody is complaining or angry about something, like they're mad at the church for something we did, you know, if I try to excuse or explain ourselves, man, they're
Mhm.
just going to get angrier.
Yeah.
But if I go into understanding mode, okay, I'm not trying to defend. I'm just wanting this person to feel that I understand their concern. Boy, it really makes a difference. So you can use this in a lot of different contexts.
That's awesome. I want to go back to real quick. You said in one of your sessions, the wife said it's hard to listen when you feel like you're not being listened to. So, um, I'm divorced. I know in my brief marriage, that was a problem because my ex spouse always told me I thought I was smarter than him. So I
Hmm.
always thought I was smarter than him. I thought I knew better than him. And um, but it's crazy that I would tell him something and he wouldn't receive it from me, but someone else outside of the marriage or outside of the house would tell him the exact same thing, and it's like, oh, now the light bulb went off. But
Hmm.
not only in marriage, but we also deal with that kind of thing at work,
Hmm.
um, and in our friendships and in everyday relationships. Like, what would you say to someone? Like, how would we? What is something that we can put into practice when we don't feel like we're being listened to? that we can step outside of ourselves and say, hold on, maybe they're not understanding what we're saying, and what do I need to do to make them understand what I'm saying without screaming and getting irate?
Well, two ways to approach this. One is you model it. Okay. So if you don't feel that you're being understood by the other person, that they're being defensive, that they're being judgmental, one way is to simply just say, I'm going to show this person what understanding looks like. And you make it your goal to, when they're expressing to you that I'm going to try to feed it back. And at the end of this conversation, or as part of this conversation, I want this person to feel understood. Understanding, when you feel understood by another human being, it is an amazing just experience. Some would call it, I feel loved or I feel cared for. So I mean, if it's a work relationship and you got to keep it professional, then obviously you don't want it to have those kind of tones. But in the same way, when someone feels understood, they're going to feel like you really care about them. So you do take the first step, or like they say, be the better person. Go the high road, and you do it, because once they start seeing how well it makes them feel, then the next thing you can do is you can ask them to return the favor, you know, and that would be the other kind of take that you could go with this. I like to ask couples, what do you want? That's always the starting question. What do you want? What do you want to see happen in this relationship? If it's a conflict with two people at work, I haven't really had this too much, but I can imagine myself doing this, or a relationship between two friends. If they come to me and they're just at odds, I'll be like, well, what do you really want? Okay. Do
Mhm.
you want this relationship to end, or do you want it to continue? Do you want it to get close? Do you want it to be blessed? And sometimes if they're really going two different directions, I ask them this question: what do you think God wants
Mhm.
in your relationship, in your marriage? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, all right. Well, you know what? God wants us to work this out. Okay. Well, then here's how. You have to both commit to understanding each other. And I'm going to teach
Mhm.
you how. It's really simple, but it takes some work and some practice. And so, if a person that you're in a relationship with isn't giving you back the reciprocal whatever understanding,
Mhm.
that you're trying to understand them, but they don't want to understand you, you could actually ask for that. You can say, hey, I want to have a close relationship with you. Okay. And I'm doing my best to try to understand you. Would you please try to understand me? And then see where it goes from there. I mean, it's a little bit vulnerable, I know, to ask that,
Yeah.
but that's
it,
that's what
it's simple,
relationships
but
need
yet,
sometimes.
yeah, we don't think about that. It's simple, but it is vulnerable. Like, I've never thought about, let's just ask, can you sit down? Can you just take the time to understand me? A lot of people haven't thought about that. We just want to be heard so bad.
Yeah.
We just want to
And
be
so
heard.
what we have is we have two people demanding to be heard,
Yeah.
right? And when we demand to be heard, then we really don't focus. It's here's what I need, here's what I need, here's what I want you to do. And until somebody says, okay, the way to get what I want is to first give you what you want.
Mm, yes.
That I think is also helpful. The way to get what I want is to give you what you want. What do you want in this situation? Okay. Now, depending on what it is, you may not be able to give it, but at least you can give them understanding.
Yeah.
Okay. Understanding, by the way, doesn't mean agreement, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean approval, nor does it mean that you're going to do what they want you to do. Okay. It simply means you want them to know that you understand what they're asking for. Does that make sense?
Yes. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And that I think then is helpful as well, because then if you're saying, okay, what do they really want? They want to be understood. All right, I can give them that by
Yeah.
just focusing on their needs, on their concerns, on their struggles. And sometimes this understanding skill is beyond some people's capability.
Mm-hmm.
The narcissist, it's all about them. It's not about you. So if
Yeah.
you're in a relationship with that kind of person, there might be some other strategies, but by and large, if you're in a relationship or a marriage with two more or less healthy people, and let's face it, we're all messed up just in different ways. That's why we all need Jesus, by the way. But
Right.
but at least if there's a little bit of emotional health and emotional self-awareness, then there can be this place of, okay, I'll put aside my desires in order to focus on understanding yours. And so most people can do that, but you got to set it up. And I always think, like Jesus said, that he came not to be served, but to serve and to give his
Yeah.
life as a ransom for many. That's Mark 10:45. So Jesus came not to be served. I think in our relationships and marriages, it's helpful to say, okay, I'm in this relationship to serve. What can
Yeah.
I do? How can I understand? And then if I'm doing something that my spouse doesn't like and they express that to me, well, then I can maybe make some changes. Maybe I can do it differently or do it in a way that's not going to be, whatever, offensive or troublesome to them.
Yeah. That's all. We have a question from the audience. How do
Oh,
you work through mirroring one another's trauma? Hmm.
I'm not really clear what the term mirroring means, but let me give it a stab. Okay. So as a police chaplain, I have been involved with people who are in different stages of trauma. Sometimes the trauma is immediate. Like I remember having a conversation the day after this family, their son was out driving on his way to the gym and was in a fatal car accident, and he was killed by a man who was actually fleeing because he robbed a store over some, alcohol. He robbed
Mhm.
this grocery store and he was running away. The police weren't chasing him. It was the security guard from the store, which was probably the wrong choice, but nevertheless, I'm talking to this family the next morning, like less than 12 hours later. I've been called up to talk to families who've had a child that's been murdered, or a son or a daughter, just different. So I've had those kind of experiences, and so often when we're dealing with trauma, what I've found to be helpful is to just let the person tell their story, not really to mirror it, but to just let them process it. And grief works the same way. When someone's grieving and working through the emotions of loss, which are anger and sadness, then it's helpful to just listen to them and let them express it. One thing I do have to remind myself, however, is that their crisis, as much as I want to empathize with them and feel with them or try to feel what they're feeling so that I can understand, I do remind myself that their crisis is not my crisis.
Mhm.
So I don't want to over identify and take it home with me. That's just a little bit of so sometimes when you're talking about mirroring, if kind of what I think the person's asking for is, what if someone's telling you about your trauma and it triggers your own feelings of trauma? If that's what they're asking for, you know, just realize that the way to help that person deal with their trauma is to let them verbally process it by talking about it. But you don't need to take it in as your own trauma. And if it triggers something inside of you because you can relate to a memory that's similar, then ask for equal time. Hey, can I share with you what happened when I was 6 years old? Or when whatever, or when I was on this date and this guy, whatever, tried to rape me, whatever the trauma might be. But listening, here's another key I hope your listeners really realize. When anyone you care about is struggling emotionally, and it could be anything from a little trauma to a huge trauma or work challenge or whatever, the best way to help is to listen.
Yeah.
I think as Christians, that God can only use us when we're talking, right? Hey, God used me today. I got to share my faith. Or
Yeah.
God used me today. I got to give some advice to somebody. Well, if they want the advice, yeah, absolutely. But let me assure you that God uses us when we listen and when we're
Yeah.
there and in our presence with them. In fact, that was another thing that it really opened up my eyes when I went through the training to become a chaplain, is that they talked a lot about having the ministry of presence. And that
Mhm.
ministry of presence is just being with someone in the most unbelievable traumatic situation that you can imagine. And I've done that, and it's hard. I don't want to make it sound like it's easy to do. It's very draining emotionally. It's very taxing, and I have to then get help myself, depending on the situation. Later to process the trauma that I experienced by helping someone with their trauma. So that
Yeah.
happens too. But when you're husband or wife, getting back to the kind of marriage and communication, it's learning that the best way that I can help my wife is to listen to her as she processes her pain. And a
Yeah.
lot of couples don't understand how to do that. Especially, I think guys really struggle with this because we go into fix it mode. Okay, my wife has a problem. Here, let me tell her what should do. In fact, that's the
Mhm.
other thing I tell couples not to do. Don't put shoulds all over each other. Well, you
Yeah.
should do this and you should do that. But yet we want to help because we love the person, that we're married to. We want to ease their pain. We want to help them deal with it. But the worst thing to do is give advice when they're not ready for it and not asking for it. Because notice this, when you start talking, who stops talking?
Mm.
It's the other person. And the
Yeah.
best thing for them to do when they're in pain is talk.
Yeah. Wow.
Hi everyone! Join the Kingdom Fanatics community. Get exclusive content, green room access with our guests, and more. Visit our website at whogodsays.com. Like and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate your love and support. To find all information on joining our community, being a guest on the show, donating on our PayPal donation page, and more, visit us at whogodsays.com. Now back to the show.
Wow. I like that you said God can also use you with just your presence. I said this in a previous episode, but I was at a bar one night and there was a lady walking past the bar and she looked really upset. And I was like, "Hey, do you need a hug?" And I gave her a hug and she just started bawling her eyes out and she was like she just got off of work or she got fired or something. She broke up with a boyfriend. It was like a mess of a day. And I
Mm-hmm.
just stood there and just let her talk. And the other people at the bar was like, "Do you know her?" I'm like, "No, no." But I just let her talk and she was like, "Thank you so much." I was like, "Okay, no problem." You know, I just felt like she needed a hug. And I mean, I'm that type of person. Um, I've said it before, like I go out, I go to different places and I can go by myself. I have no problem with going by myself, but I always end up talking to somebody. Someone always end up they feel comfortable talking to me. So I
Mm-hmm.
never have a problem with that. Like I understand that that's something that is just gonna come. It's been since I was a child and I am okay with it. But I do want to ask, when we're talking about trauma, what if the person has experienced some type of trauma that they're suppressing and um it's causing a problem or situations in your relationship? How do
Mm.
you, because with that, they're not really talking about it, so it's no way for you to listen, but you can't force it out of them. But then this trauma is actually causing a disruption in the relationship. What do we do?
Um, Probably the best thing is recognize that when you're too close to it, because see, we
Mm.
all filter everything by the how is this going to impact me? Or the other way to remember that, I heard this from somebody, is that we listen to the WIIFM radio station in our head. WIIFM stands for What's in It for Me. Or to put it another way, how is this going to impact me?
Yeah.
And so it's really hard for us to let go of that filter. It can be done, by the way, but it takes some effort. But when the past trauma is impacting your current relationship, really the best thing to do is get professional help. And there is a difference between what I provide, which is marriage coaching, and then there's marriage counseling or therapy. When there's a lot of trauma involved, I encourage that couple to go see a therapist. But probably what needs to happen is that the person that's been traumatized needs to then work through that trauma, in a loving, supportive way. But it's recognizing that, if the wife is traumatized by something that happened, and we're all traumatized by life, unfortunately, but there's different degrees. And when it then is the kind of thing that's impacting your present because of something that happened in the past, God wants to heal that. And oftentimes, if not most of the time, the way he heals that is when you process it with someone who's trained to help you with that. And that's not my training, or that's not my lane, but I encourage people, you may need to go get some help with that. Now, as you're going through that, if you want to talk about how to communicate or how to, solve issues between the two of you, that's more what I deal with. But I would encourage somebody with that kind of, background trauma that's impacting their relationship. Yeah, invest in seeing a good, therapist.
Yeah. Okay. So in your marriage coaching, what do you see couples struggle with the most?
Oh, good question. Well, I've been doing this coaching in addition to the pastoral and the police chaplain responsibilities. I've been holding appointments with couples now for the last couple of years, ever since my book came out, and I've logged probably somewhere over 300 hours now of coaching sessions with different couples and sometimes individuals. And some of the couples, by the way, have been dating couples. Most of them are married, but some have been dating.
Oh,
Anyways,
wow.
I've identified 5 common mistakes, and I've already talked about a couple of them here. But this is what I call, and there's probably more than 5. In fact, as I think about it, there absolutely are more than 5. But here's some of the top 5 that I've encountered that
Okay, I'm taking
couples
notes.
do. Okay, so the first one, mistake number 1, is what I call wrong priorities. So that's where we let things like work, kids, and hobbies take precedence over our marriage or relationship. Okay. So, you're spending all your time at work. Okay. Police officers fall into this trap a lot.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, partly because they're, like I was talking with another chaplain yesterday from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and he serves a sheriff's station here in our area, and I'm in a local police department. Anyways, they have mandatory overtime, so these deputies are being required to work overtime. And that happens even in our department. It happens a lot, depending on staffing shortages or whatever. But if you're working all the time and you're never spending any time with your wife or your husband, that's a wrong priority. And if you have to, you have to. But then as things change, what happens is then it becomes a choice and it's not a demand. So anyways, that's where it becomes a mistake. The other one we've talked about a lot, but it's not listening. Or it's listening to reply, not listening to understand. So that would be the second most common mistake. So like we talked about, instead of focusing on understanding, they're focusing on listening to reply. What am I going to say when they stop? Okay.
Yeah.
Third mistake, see if any of your listeners can relate to this one. Exploding with anger. Yeah. So what happens?
I can.
I can too. I've made this mistake a lot.
I
So
can.
when and we're always going to do things that hurt the person we love. We're messed up. We need Jesus. We're all in process. God's working
Yeah.
on our hearts. But I'm going to do things inevitably that's going to make my wife mad. She's going to do things that's going to make me mad. Okay. And so what do? We go into we start venting that anger. And if they respond with defensiveness,
Mm.
or if they start, as a defense mechanism, they start fighting back. Okay.
Yeah.
What happens then is that this conversation now becomes explosively angry. And when it does, nothing good is going to happen. In fact, the only thing that you're going to do is you're going to hurt each other and you're going to
Yeah.
make the problem worse. So the answer here, the solution, I should say, to this mistake is to learn how to calm down first.
Mm.
The Bible says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. Okay. But it
Yeah.
also says, in your anger, don't sin. It's the
Yeah.
same verse. I
Yeah.
misquoted it. In your anger,
Yeah.
don't sin. Don't let the sun go down
Mhm.
on your anger. So I always used to think, well, that means you got to resolve the problem before you go to bed. I don't think that's what it means anymore. What I think it means, because it doesn't work, okay? When I've tried to resolve an issue and my wife is still angry or I'm still angry, it just makes it worse when we try to force that conversation. Um, what you can do, though, is you step away, okay? You call a timeout. And now a timeout, here's the big fear, by the way, in a timeout, is that people think, well, then we're never going to talk about it. We're just going to try to
Mm.
sweep it under the rug and keep going. No, a timeout is we're not going to talk about this now, but we're going to calm down and then we're going to come back and talk. Okay.
Yeah.
So it is a promise to return. And if it's not there, then yeah, there's another issue. But what you do on a timeout, I always tell couples to do this. And once again, I learned this from the cops, all my police friends and the trainings that I've gone to. Have a drink of water.
Mm.
Having a drink of water when you're angry works like magic. Ty, the next time you're angry at your teenager and you think I'm going to be saying something or doing something and I'm going to regret later, you don't strike me as an angry person, but since you mentioned it and since we all do, just try this, okay? Walk away and just say, okay, I tell your son or daughter, I need to calm down. Give me 15 minutes. And you walk away, have a drink of water. It will immediately calm you down. And what it does is that it resets your brain. Okay. So
Mm.
this is the little physiology lesson that I learned. The front part of your brain, okay, is the place where you make all your decisions. That's the way God
Okay.
made you. The back part of your brain is the more primitive part, and what it's called is the amygdala. This is called the prefrontal cortex. But here's what happens. This part is fight or flight. I'm either going to fight back or I'm going to run away, right? Okay. So when you get angry, I don't mean just feel angry. When you start exploding with anger and your anger builds and now you're
Yeah.
just venting it, okay, what happens? The blood flow, believe it or not, shifts from this part of the brain where you think clearly and you're able to make a good, reasonable statement. And now you're in this back part and you're either attacking or you're running away. So
Mm.
when you have that drink of water, it just kind of slows this down and reconnects you with your part of your brain that says, okay, let's think about this. What do I
Yeah.
need to say to make this better? Okay.
Wow.
Instead of grounding your son for the next 15 years or whatever punishment you feel like doing, right? Let's
It's two
think
girls. I
about,
have two teenage
oh, you
girls,
have
and
two
that's
girls.
crazy.
Okay. Yeah, that is true. That would be crazy. Yeah. And so um, before you start grounding them for life, right? Just have a drink of water. Think about, okay, what do I need to address here? What, and then seek to understand their side of it as well. I think that
Yeah.
that's always key. But then you can come back and say, and okay, so may I go into parenting? I have a parenting course, by the way,
Let's
as
go.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So here's the two mistakes that I think, and I'll get back to my marriage mistakes, but can I just
Okay.
comment on this one? Okay, two
Mm-hmm.
mistakes that I think parents make with their kids when when they're disciplining them is too much talking and too much emotion.
Ooh.
If your daughter um, disobeys you, crosses a boundary, you said don't do this, and they do, okay? You need to think about it, need to pray about it, ask
Yes.
God for wisdom, okay? And then without getting angry, you need to come back and give her the consequence of her choice. And I'm just going to pause there and let that sink in for a
Yeah.
moment.
Pause.
So, anyways, and I'm not trying to tell you what to do, by the way. I'm just giving you a
No, it
suggestion.
makes sense.
Please understand. But that I think it, and then we treat our spouse, our husband, our wives like a kid, and I've heard this, I feel like my wife treats me like one of the kids. And in fact, I had this one husband, he tells me, my wife goes into mom mode with me. And then he confessed, well, then I guess it's appropriate because later on, depending what I'm concerned about, I go into boss mode and he starts giving orders. So both of those are not healthy because you are not your spouse's mom or dad. You're not their parent. Okay. And that's where we start putting shoulds on them and all the other stuff. So, anyways, exploding with anger is a huge mistake that is extremely damaging to a marriage. And that's the kind of damage that then needs to be forgiven. But forgiveness takes time and it's a process. But if you can learn how to manage your anger and express what you need to say in a way without getting angry, that's going to be you're going to have a much healthier relationship. Okay, back to our 5 mistakes. So those were 3. Number 4, not asking for what you need.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'll hear this from couples. Well, he never takes me out to dinner. We never go out on dates. He's not very nice to me. Okay. Well, what can you do about that? Well, you can drop hints. Okay. And that may or may not work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you can just simply ask, hey, I would like it if we started going out to dinner once a week, once a month, whatever you guys can, and it doesn't have to be fancy, but, let's get
Yeah.
a babysitter. Let's, spend time just the two of us. But what we do, we drop hints, we're very indirect about it, or then we just stuff it inside and then we wish they knew. And that can make you
Yeah.
angry as well. So not asking for what you need or what you want is another common mistake. And then number 5, the other common mistake is not getting help when you need it.
Mm.
And let me tell you, well, I don't want to tell you anything. Let me rephrase that. let me suggest, but I believe that marriage or even just successful relationships, any kind of romantic relationship, okay? It's a skill that you need to learn how to do. I think one of the big reasons that a lot of marriages fail is because we go into it thinking that everything's going to be wonderful. And when it's not, instead of learning how to make it work, they just give up. Oh, well, it's not meant to be, it's this person's, and then they start blaming the other person and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of marriages can be saved simply if you learn how to be married. The best marriage book, by the way, is the Bible.
Yes,
I am
indeed.
seeing, as I've been on this journey of helping couples, I see it's like the Holy Spirit says, hey, That's a marriage tip right there. That's a marriage tip. I went through the Beatitudes in my own personal Bible study, and then I made a series of videos on them that are on YouTube called The Hidden Married Tips of Jesus.
Mm.
And there it's just things like, like he says, blessed are those that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Well, how do we comfort each other in our marriage when we're mourning? Okay. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Okay. How do we walk in purity? That's a huge one in a marriage, and it's not
Yeah.
just purity of action, it's purity of thought and heart, dealing with lustful thoughts. That's more of a guy problem than a girl problem. But, women fall into the trap of pornography and the other things, temptations that are out there, both men and women. It's not just a guy thing. Anyways, the Bible has, I think, the way God wants us to live as married couples. My
Yes.
favorite marriage Bible verse, by the way, is Genesis 2:24. And by the way, I don't know if you knew this. Here's a little Bible trivia for you. It's in the Bible 5 times. So 5 different times this verse in one form or another is mentioned. It goes like this. For this reason, a man would leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. That's it.
And that's in the
That's
Bible
God's
5
plan.
times.
That's what God wants to do in our lives. And it's in the Bible. Jesus said it. The Apostle Paul taught it. It's in the Bible 5 times.
Wow. Wow. Years ago, I saw a couple. I'm from New Orleans, and I saw a couple sitting by the lake, and they were older people. And I asked them how long have they been married. They was like, we've been married for over 44 years. I was like, that's awesome. And I was like, how did you stay married that long? And the husband said, don't walk away and learn how to fight fair.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, okay. So, I mean, that was the last thing that was said. And it was like, okay, as I've grown and I've walked through different relationships and even my own marriage, the biggest thing was learn how to fight fair.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, that's hard because when you're fighting, it's like, I got to hurt you or you're going to hurt me. I got to make sure I hurt you worse so you won't hurt me worse. Like it's that part, that tug of war. Ooh, learn how to fight fair. For me, I was just like, can we just not fight at all? But I know that's unrealistic. So when I say I explode in anger, it's like I let things piled up and then it explodes. I'm not just you do something I don't like, I'm not going off the hinges. I will address some things and say, hey, I don't like this or I don't like that. But then we're women and we don't want to seem like we're nagging. So learning how to fight fair is hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's absolutely hard.
Well, but it can be done. And so I think, and when he said, don't walk away, well, there is a time to walk away. You just don't stay away. You walk away and
Yeah, I
calm
think
down
you
and then
mean like
come back.
making it final, like giving up, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't give up. But fighting fair simply means I'm going to let you express what, is wrong. How I offended you, how I hurt you. I'm going to focus on understanding that. And then I'm going to do what I need to do to correct that. And then, apologize. What can I do? What can I say? How can I make it right? Then on the other hand, um, I would like to share, my perspective on this, and I would like you to understand, like we were talking about earlier, it's a two-way street, and so
Yeah.
understanding each other, reaching out to each other, that's what I think he means by fighting fair.
Yeah. And no low blows.
Exactly, exactly. And see, the reason when we're hurt, our sinful nature wants to hurt. We do. We want to get even. We want revenge. But
Yeah.
really, it's recognizing that for the good of the relationship, you know what, this, I need to just focus on, okay, let me own my part. Let me hear what I did that's wrong. Let me apologize, and then allow me to, make it right and move on from there.
Yeah, that's hard. But it makes a lot of sense. It does, especially when you think about how you would want the other person to do that toward you. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, we have to stop thinking about what's in it for me and just kind of flip it and say, okay, if I want them to do this for me, then I need to do this for them. So
Yeah.
putting yourself in that mindset makes it a little bit easier. But when you've grown up with seeing these things where people are like, "Ooh, he just said that. Ooh, she said that. They didn't need to say that." It's like you get kind of scared and you're like, "Okay, we're arguing. Should I say it? Should I say it?" Should I say it?"
Hmm. And that's where, I think sometimes, it's like you call a timeout before it
Yeah.
reaches that place of explosive anger. And then you walk away, and then you calm down and you script. You can write out, here's what I need to say. Okay, here's what I need to ask for. Here's what I need. And I give couples little scripts. And one of the scripts is, I feel or I felt angry when you, and then you say that. And if they say something that's inappropriate or hurtful, call them on it. Hey, wait, time out. I'm sorry. That really offended me. And I'm not going to let you be, I'm not going to be your emotional punching bag. I'm not going to let you just, call me names. Let's have a good discussion here. Let's calm down and let's come back. If we want to make this relationship work, it takes setting boundaries, it takes respect, it takes mutual love. And love is all about, I don't want to hurt the other person. And
Yeah.
if you're in a relationship with a person that's hurtful, well, then you need to set some boundaries and not let them hurt you
Yeah.
in any way. And certainly if they're hurting you physically, then yeah, the boundary needs to be some space. You need to separate yourself from that person until they're able to get that under control, because it's never right or okay, for them to physically abuse you. On the other hand, if they're verbally abusive, you can set a boundary with that as well. I want to have a good relationship with you, but when you get angry and start calling me names, I I cannot do that. I will not let you do that. And I need you to, maybe we need some help. Maybe you need some therapy to work on your anger issues. But I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to stop the conversation and walk away if you're going to
Yeah.
call me names. And setting those kind of healthy boundaries can also be really necessary, and it's healthy for a relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of fighting fair. You know, let's resolve the issue, not just sweep it under the rug, or then go into that explosive anger area. And oftentimes that's where you need some help. Like I said,
Yeah.
either from a coach like myself or from a therapist. So, coaching, by the way, is a lot about teaching couples skills and helping them use the skills. And so that's kind of what I see coaching as. Whereas therapy is a lot about, okay, let's uncover the past hurts and deal with those. And then, and that has a place as well. It's just not what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you how do you advise couples or like marriages or either people who's in the relationship looking for marriage? How would you advise them on creating this type of safe space at home where they can communicate authentically and intentionally to have those conversations where, look, you hurt me. What can you advise them to do to create those spaces?
Well, first off, is you need to get a new game plan. You need to come up with a new strategy and admit that perhaps what we're doing now isn't working. We're hurting
Hmm.
each other. We're hurting our marriage. We're going in the wrong direction. We're getting defensive, and I think we need some help. And so, if depending on if you're, some couples I've heard of can do it themselves, but that's where getting a coach like myself, is like, okay, let's figure out a way where we can create this. Tell me what's going on is usually the first question. Tell me what you want. What does God want? Well, we need to stop hurting each other. We need to create that safe space where we can express ourselves. Okay, well, let's talk about and figure out a way to get there. And when I get the couples on board with that, then they're able to implement some skills that would create that. And it really does take, by the way, a commitment on both sides. So the other way you could get there if you didn't want professional help is at least read a book, that's going to give you some guidance and give you some new skills in that way. So you could read a book, or there's lots of, video courses and things out there, that you could go through that would give you that input. But this is probably one of those areas where you can't figure it out on your own. Okay. That you're probably going to have to learn something different in order to have a different kind of dynamic and atmosphere in your home. But you can definitely get there. I've seen it happen. I've helped couples get there. It's happened in our own marriage too. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. 36 years, right?
Yep. 2 kids and 3 grandkids.
Oh my God, you're a papa.
Yeah, I am.
Oh my God. Papa. Do they call you Papa?
No, it's either grandpa, or then I have a habit, by the way, as I talk to people, to call people, especially guys, buddy. Hey, buddy, how you doing? Stuff like that. I don't know how I got into this, but I do it a lot. And so my granddaughter picked up on it. So with her, I'm buddy. Hey, buddy. And so she calls me buddy all the time, which I just love. And then,
That
but
is so
mostly it's
cute.
grandpa.
That is so cute. Oh, well, I'm from New Orleans and we're Creole. So we have grandpa, we have papa, we have grandpere. So we have a few of them. And we have parang.
Oh,
Yeah, we have a few of them.
excellent.
So let the audience know where they can find your book and your services.
All right. Well, here is a copy of the book just to show you that it's real. See, it's called Turn It Up: How to Have the Lifelong Marriage That You Really Want. The first section of it deals with what I call asking the connection question, which is this monitoring tool that I came up with to say, where are we at? Then I give 5 commitments to make and 5 skills to learn and to use. And the difference between a commitment and a skill is that a commitment you do all the time. Okay. A skill, by the way, is just when you need it. So I'm offering it right now at 75% off retail price. So you go to turnitup.coach, all one word, /75. So turnitup.coach/75 will get you, just type that in your browser, in your phone or your computer, whatever. It'll take you right to the sales page. $3.99 for the digital copy, $4.99 for the print copy. Print, by the way, is U.S. orders only. So if you have any international listeners, sorry, can't. You got to get the digital one. But the digital one works great. You can download it on your phone. You can put it on your iPad. You can read it on your computer. There's all kinds of cool things that you can kind of do with the digital copy. And then, it's a lot more convenient to carry around with you. So anyways, but yeah, $3.99 for that. And then if you would like some more information about me and about my services, especially in marriage coaching, as a listener of this podcast, okay, you let me know you heard about me on Who God Says. I would like to give you a free 1-hour marriage coaching session. I call it a clarity call. And it is, let's figure out where you're at and where you want to be and I want to give you a 3-point roadmap on how to get there, a specific game plan, and would love to give that to every one of your listeners for free. So to book that, just go to turnitup.coach. And you'll find that's my webpage, and you'll be able to, you'll say book free clarity call or schedule, something like that. and you click that and it takes you right to my calendar. So love to have you on there and love
Hey,
to
that's
help you any way
amazing.
that I can.
That is amazing. All right. Got a free call here. Come on, y'all. Okay. I want to ask this question. Is your coaching, I know you said you deal with a lot of people that are dating. So, for people that are dating, what are some main, I'm single, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to make sure that I'm in the position where I am healed, open, and humble enough to receive my husband. So, what is like the number one advice you can give to someone who's actively seeking to be in a marriage as far as communication goes? Like, what would be that first step just to make sure you're going in the right direction and it doesn't turn left, you know?
Very good. So, really, the thing is to grow spiritually and
Mhm.
emotionally. Okay. So, and when I say grow emotionally, it's to just, get in touch with your own needs and your own feelings. Growing spiritually is just, yeah, church, Bible, prayer,
Yeah.
serving, really grasp the destiny and plan that God has for your life and just really, seek to grow closer to the Lord in your personal relationship with Him. Then, regarding emotional, yeah, get in touch with your own needs. But then I would say, especially regarding communication, um, learn how to use these skills.
Yeah.
So you can take my book and the 5 skills that I have in the second part and apply them to, like I said, work situations, parenting, friendships. You can apply them in a lot of different ways. And so when you learn how to understand each other and or how to understand someone, when you learn how to ask for what you need in a relationship, and you start putting those into practice, that's going to set you up to be more successful in that marriage. The other thing is when I meet with when I meet with a dating couple, it's usually to help them communicate better. But I'm also challenging them to really seek God's will and pray, is this relationship God's best?
Yes.
So that's the question you want to ask. If you're in a relationship, is this the best? Is this God's best? This person God's best for me? And if they are, then yeah, continue to develop it, take it slow, let God bring you closer together, and then, ask the Lord if it's His will that you would, form that lifelong, make that lifelong commitment to each other. Marriage is for keeps. It's not and dating is sort of the try before you buy phase. You get a trial run of some things. Now,
Yeah.
there are some things you don't get to try, as you know what I'm talking about, until you get
Yes.
married. Okay. And that, by the way, is also God's blessing. Okay. I think if there's another mistake that couples make, it's that they misunderstand the value of sex. It is
Yeah.
God's gift, but it's made and designed within the context of a lifelong commitment. And when couples get sexually involved before they're married, it creates a lot of confusion, a lot of pain. When they break up, the breakup is worse if you've been sexually involved with that person. And then, believe it or not, when you get married, couples then allow that part to they neglect it. And sex becomes something that they're too busy, or maybe because they're hurt and they're angry at each other, they just they don't, they're not physically intimate. And so if that's the case, get some help so that you can have a healthy sex life. It really is God's gift, and it is a great thing to enjoy. But I think a lot of couples, let it either lapse or they enjoy it in the wrong way. So, but dating is that place of, you know what, I want to get to know this person. Get to know them when they're stressed out. See them when they're in pain.
Yes.
Get to understand them. Allow those times when you've offended each other to see how they'll take responsibility for that and apologize. All of the things that they would, that you would like them to do. So, anyways, yep.
That makes
And
sense.
I'm
I
here to
call it
help
the
you if you
50
need it.
shades. I call it the 50 shades of dating.
Absolutely. There you go. Yep.
Yep. You gotta know. I mean, you're not going to know every single aspect because you're not going to really endure everything while you're dating. But for the most part, like I want to see how you are with your family. I want to see how you are when you're angry. I want to see what makes you happy. I want to see if there's those little things that kind of aggravate you, and then do you let it pile up? Do you talk about it? Do you those type of things? I call it the 50 shades of dating.
Absolutely. And, do they pay their bills on time? Do they
Yes.
manage their finances well?
Yes.
Are they constantly in debt? Do they overspend? Are they, struggling with any kind of addiction?
Yes.
All of those things you want to see
What is
it.
your prayer life like? I want to know it
Yeah. Are they
all.
consistent in church? Are they,
Yes.
are they, serving someplace? Are they growing? All of those things are critical as you evaluate. Now, the Bible tells us, by the way, not to judge.
Right.
But when you're dating, your job is to evaluate.
I like
It
that.
really
Don't
is.
judge, evaluate. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Are they growing? Are they responsible financially? Are they handling all those things you just mentioned, Ty? Exactly. You need to evaluate them on that. And,
Yeah.
if there's a problem, realize that they're probably not going to change once you get married.
Yeah.
What you see is what you get. And now they can grow, but it's going to be up to them,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I remember talking with this couple that her, when they were dating, actually, they came to me for premarital counseling, and he was 6 months sober. And I looked at her and I just said, I would not marry this guy. If you were my daughter, I would tell you, don't marry this guy until he's got at least a year. Well, they didn't listen. Not that I'm always right, but I was right that time.
Yeah.
And as soon as they got married, he started drinking again. Maybe not right away, but at some point he started drinking again. And their marriage ended up in divorce because he loved his alcohol more than he loved her. And
Yes.
it was really sad, but that could have been prevented. And she even told me, she said, I wish I'd have listened to you that day and just
Yeah.
waited and given it some more time to see if he really is committed to his sobriety. So
Yeah.
don't do that.
Don't do that. Sometimes you can kind of, like you said, people will grow, but
Hmm.
um, maybe in opinions, but sometimes if they feel like this is definitely a principle that they live by or something that they stand on, they're probably not going to grow from that. But they can grow from
No, no, no,
opinions. Like
exactly.
if it's a person who absolutely do not want children, and you want children, you're probably not going to change their mind about that. That's probably not opinion. That's something that they stand on. So
Yeah.
it's like you
But
do
like an
have to kind of,
addiction,
yeah,
like I said, an addiction, you can change.
yeah,
And that that's where it's like, okay, well, he already started. Is he really committed to changing this, for good? We'll give him some more time and make sure.
yeah. Give them some time.
So, but yeah, things like an addiction, an anger problem, you can grow out of that, if they want to, if there's that willingness. You can't force them
Yeah,
and you can't persuade them. You can't put shoulds on them, you know, but you can, yeah, let them know that, hey, I want to see you get a handle on this before we get married.
yeah. And if they're actually working towards that progress, then yeah, that's a good sign. But if it's something that you're not seeing progress in, or like the turtle in the shell where they're start
Yeah,
to move and then they duck backwards, I can't deal with that. Nope, that's not.
no, exactly. Right. Which is a coping mechanism, so they need to be right.
Yeah, yep. Okay, I ask this question to everyone. What do you believe is your purpose? And how did you accept it?
Oh, gosh. I believe my purpose is to take as many people with me to heaven as I can.
Oh,
And I do
I love
that
that.
by serving, by sharing God's love in practical ways. Marriage coaching is another way for me to share the love of Jesus. and it's helping, if when I think about marriage coaching, I'm not just thinking about that couple, I'm thinking about their kids,
Yeah.
and if I can help those kids, by helping their parents stay together, and work through their issues and learn how to make it work in their marriage, that is showing the love of Jesus in a practical way. And then my conversations and opportunities that I get to serve people that don't know the Lord, it's all about, what can I do to help them find Jesus?
Yeah. I love that. Oh my gosh. That was straight to the point. Help as many people as possible go to heaven with me. Yeah, I love
Exactly.
that. I love that. Anything else you want to say to the audience?
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to be on your show, Ty. It's great to see the love of Jesus in your heart and in your
Thank
smile
you.
and in your questions, that you really care and love about people. And I just pray God's blessing on you and on this podcast and on the ministry that God has for you. And I guess final thought to everybody listening. Ask yourself, let me just go back. I already mentioned this, but I just want to remind yourself, when you think about your marriage, if you're married, ask, what does God want? And if it's not what you think God wants you to have, then do something about it. Because you can have what God wants you to have in your marriage. Now, it's going to take some change. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some learning. It's going to take probably somebody helping you, but you know what? You can get there. Yeah, God wants you to have a great marriage if you're married. And if you're dating, and if it's His will, because sometimes it's not, if it's His will for you to get married, then, what does God want? Well, He wants to give you a great spouse, a great husband or wife. He wants you to then grow in that and have that lifelong marriage that you really want, that He really wants you to have. So ask yourself that question. What does God want? God, what do you want for me in this situation?
That's awesome. That is so awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time and your talent and your gift. Thank you so much.
Well, you are so welcome. It was a joy and an honor. And thank you.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us today on the Who God Says podcast with your host and Kingdom Ambassador, Ty Chandra. Go to whogodsays.com to join the mailing list for episode premieres, upcoming guests, and more. Send in your questions to be a part of the show at whogodsays@gmail.com. And don't forget, join the Kingdom Fanatic community. Until next time, be blessed and also be a blessing.